This is breaking news.
Since 2015, the Dogs will go dancing. It's going to be Bulldog on Bulldog. Georgia, the 9 seed, goes on to face Gonzaga, the 8 seed. They'll play Thursday. Not sure what time yet. I'm Kaylee Mansell with Jack Leo, Mike Griffith. Obviously, one of these things is not like the other. You guys are both there in Athens. You got to watch the team react. Mike, what was that like?
I mean, it's great. I mean, it's like Mike White said. I mean, this is why he came to Georgia, and these players. I mean, they bought in. They wanted to change the narrative, get the Dogs back into the NCAA tournament for the first time in 10 years, and Kaylee to do it in a year, a historically great year for the SEC. You're talking about 14 teams in the tournament, just smashes the NCAA record of 11 that was set by the Big East in 2011. A lot of people thought that could never be broken, but here's the SEC and here's Georgia. That win over SEC tournament champ Florida really turned it around for the Dogs, winning those last 4 regular season games. And Jack, I know you covered them all year long. They ran into a hot shooting Oklahoma team at the SEC tournament, but that may work in their favor. They've had a little bit more time to prepare, one more practice to go before they'll get on the plane and head to Wichita, where they will face a Titan in Gonzaga.
No, absolutely. Go ahead, Jack.
No, you said it, Mike. I mean, that's what's going to be so helpful for this team. I mean, the last time they had an extra week to prepare, it was that off week. They come in, they play a lot better against Auburn, and then that's that court right behind me. Everybody's storming it because, oh my goodness, Georgia just beat Florida. Here we are. So, you give Mike White another off week to prepare. You get some of that time to sit on the couch, watch the rest of the SEC tournament, and, who knows how far these Dogs can go from there.
Yeah, one thing I'm always excited to see with March Madness is the behind the numbers. And for them, 9 seeds are 81-75 all time against 8 seeds, and they've made the Sweet 16 8 times. I know y'all got to watch the team react. Jack, what was their reaction to seeing their opponent? Do you feel like going up against?
Well, they're not going to tip their hand too much. There wasn't an, oh, shoot, we got Gonzaga, none of that goodness. But, I mean, honestly, the general vibe in the building was just we're happy to be here, which I think kind of is a good vibe check for the general DawgNation Georgia basketball fan feel at the moment. Obviously it is a tough draw, but they've had worse.
Yeah. And speaking of the draw, I mean, the way you look at it now, the downside to being the 8 and the 9, you're going to go play the 1 out of all the 1 seeds between Auburn, Duke, Florida. I think Houston might be the weaker overall number 1. Now they got to get past Gonzaga first. But Mike, one thing I'm interested in is there's been so much heat on Mike White. What he's been able to do for this Dogs team in a short amount of time has been tremendous, but a lot of people didn't feel that way for a long time. So for him to have this sort of comeback journey and be able to take this team to the tournament for the first time in 10 years, I'm glad some of that positive light is finally getting shed on Mike White, somebody that you've been really high on since he first got here.
Yeah, a loud minority that really didn't know what they were talking about. I mean, as far as the heat, it was external. It certainly wasn't the home crowd here at Stegman Coliseum. I mean, this place was always packed. The support from Josh Brooks never wavered. I mean, again, you're talking about the lunatic fringe, Kaylee. I mean, these aren't the people that understand basketball. They had an issue with Mike White this year, even when you look at the way they finished last year. And I know the NIT certainly doesn't get much street cred, but you beat a Xavier team that had never lost in the first round, basketball school that had never lost in the first round of the NIT. You go on the road, you beat a basketball school at Wake Forest that had like 1 home loss all year. Then you go to a packed house at Ohio State and knock them off. That tournament experience helps out a little bit for guys like Blue and Silas Demery. And then earlier this year, I don't know who the maniacs were that were complaining, but you beat St. John's and Rick Pitino earlier this year. You play Marquette down the wire. You take care of business against Georgia Tech. There we go again. Keep beating Georgia Tech in basketball. Beat Notre Dame at home. Again, people that maybe don't understand basketball, the elasticity of it. I mean, just look at Auburn, the number 1 seed, and the way they've struggled down the stretch. And as for Gonzaga and Mike White, I mean, Mike White has beaten Mark Few before up in Portland, Oregon. Now, granted, it was 2017, but it's not like Mike White can't coach. This guy's a good basketball coach, and his ability to go out and get the kind of players where he can compete in the SEC. I mean, if you want to talk about the bugaboo, it's that Georgia wasn't cheating. Let's just call a spade a spade. If you go back a few years ago, 3 or 4 of these teams in the league were on FBI investigation, and Georgia wasn't going there. Now it's above board. The Dogs are able to go out, get some players, build from within. You got a bona fide star in Asa Newell. He's going to go up against a tremendous 6'10" kid there at Gonzaga, but in the Zags, what I think they've won for the 22nd time. Mark Few has won that West Coast Conference, beating St. Mary's. So it's going to be a great opponent. But think about this. It's a great opportunity. And, you see Georgia playing Gonzaga. It's not like Georgia hadn't played great. They beat the Florida Gators. The Florida Gators right now are going to be the number 1 team. A lot of people are going to be picking the Gators to win the NCAA tournament. And the Dogs took care of business here. Took down a Texas team on the road that's in the NCAA tournament. Beat a Vanderbilt team to get off the bubble to get in the NCAA tournament. So this is a battle-tested team. You want to talk about the people that have followed the program and know what they're talking about. Getting here was not easy in the SEC this year, and Mike White has done a tremendous job with this basketball team. The effort of these guys, the attitude, the character. I mean, they'd lost 9 of 11 at one point, and to bounce back and finish the season with 4 straight regular season wins was really impressive. And so a historic day for the Dogs, first time back in 10 years, and what should be a really compelling first-round matchup. I mean, Mike White 4-0 in first-round games in NCAA tournaments.
Yeah, Mike, you bring up an interesting point. The first thing that came to my mind, because I was in Nashville all weekend, I saw how good Florida was playing, and they're a team that's clicking at the right time. But the fact that Georgia was able to beat that team and all of these huge wins that they have, Jack, you've been covering this team all season long. What's the ceiling for the Dogs here in the tournament? Can they actually really do something?
I don't see them topping Houston, but absolutely they can do something. They can do something by the fact that they showed up, and I mean, sure they can beat Gonzaga. I mean, it's like Mike said a minute ago, they've beat tougher teams. One of the things that Silas Demery talked about just a minute ago when he was speaking to the media before, the area where this team has grown the most, he kind of chuckled when he heard it, and it was immediate. He could tell. I mean, his answer was responses, and that's what it was for that Florida game as well, by the way, because I mean, Georgia goes up big, they lose that lead, and what does Silas and Blue and the Bulldogs do down the stretch? They outscore Florida. They outscore Florida down the stretch, a Florida team that's got all this momentum going its way. So, I mean, these guys, they can handle the elasticity, the volatility, whatever word you want to use, of a college basketball game in March Madness. I mean, it's been March Madness since March 1st when they went in and played Texas and Austin and shut them down there.
Mm-hmm. Mike, I'm thinking back to when before Asa was here, I remember you brought him in to do On the Beat with you. And now he's the points leader and the rebounds leader. When you were having that conversation with Asa at the time, did you ever imagine that at this point in time that we were going to be having a conversation like this, that he was able to take this team to March Madness?
Well, yeah, but it wasn't necessarily because of Asa. I mean, knew what he would bring is, that stretch 4 guy that can hit the 3 and just the poise in the class. I mean, the thing I want to double down on here, and Ant-Man was tremendous. Got to cover him too, yeah. And the energy and the excitement, and it kind of announced to the world that yes, you can have a legit NBA star come to Georgia. That was a breakthrough for a guy like Ant-Man to come here. It made it that much easier for Asa Newell, a guy that everybody wanted. But the class and the dignity and the poise of this kid, I mean, he is somebody that's going to make Georgia proud for years and years and years with the way he handles himself in the NBA, on and off the court. So when you've got a high character guy like that, and when your best player, from a talent standpoint, is also one of your hardest workers, you can go far. But you got to dial it back to Silas Demery Jr. and Blue Kane. Those were the 2 carryovers. The primary starters that were carried over to this year, the work that they put into the offseason, the way they bought in, made it that much easier for all the transfers to come in and buy into this program and understand the culture that Mike White was building. And, this Gonzaga team, Jack just said it. They can absolutely beat Gonzaga. Gonzaga was only 1 of 15 from 3. And the teams that give Georgia trouble, those real sharpshooter teams from 3, Georgia has some of the best 2-point field goal percentage in the country. I mean, Bruce Pearl was on and on the beat show and told us these guys are really good guarding the 2. And sure enough, Georgia took number 1 Auburn within a bucket. You saw that shot by Asa went off the front of the rim, or you got OT and Stegman against the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. So these guys have gone toe-to-toe against a lot of great basketball programs. large part because of the talent, but also the culture. So you talk about Asa Newell, you're not just talking about a great talent, you're talking about great character. At any point during that losing 9 out of 11 stretch, which happens in the SEC, like Mike White said, what'd you learn? Well, learned you weren't a top 10 team, right? You lost 6 of those games to top 10 teams on the road during that stretch. They might have been the 11th best team, but because of the level of competition, a lot of people from the outside, again, you talked about, some of the lunatic fringe out there doesn't really understand basketball and the elasticity. You're going to lose games. You got to bounce back. Maybe they didn't understand exactly what we were dealing with when we were talking about these SEC teams with 14 teams in the tournament. This makes Georgia battle tested and confident going into this game. Yeah, Gonzaga's got the big name, and Mark Few's a Hall of Famer, fantastic coach. He's done everything but win the title. I think he's got a couple Final Fours, but Mike White's beat this guy. And you give Mike White equal talent and preparation. This is a game that I expect Georgia to win in Wichita, Kansas in the first round.
Wow. Are you going to put that in your brackets that you're going to make?
Absolutely.
You're going to have Georgia making it out?
I'm trying to win. I'm trying to win the bracket, right? I'm with Jack. Houston, Houston's a handful, right? That's a fantastic program, and Kelvin Sampson's another, Hall of Fame coach. But like Mike White said, I joke, I say, get your Purdue film. That'd be who'd be waiting next, probably, right? Another basket.
Mm-hmm.
This bracket, it's brutal. But to me, I think anything is icing on the cake at this point when I look at what Georgia accomplished in this regular season, beating the Florida Gators at home, getting the number 33 team in the nation. When Mike took them over, they were 220, right? This is what's happened in 2 seasons for Mike White after year one. It really whets the appetite for what could be ahead. But you get this win over Gonzaga. This is a big head to put on the wall. You beat a coach like Mark Few at Georgia. He's done it at Florida. You do it at Georgia. You take down a program like Gonzaga. You give that program a huge boost. And who knows what happens against Houston on a neutral court. They took Auburn down to the Wild and Stegman, and they were playing within striking distance, down there in the jungle in Auburn. I'm not going to say can't do it. If this team gets a first round win, really anything's possible from any of these SEC. I look at Oklahoma as a team that you could see in the Elite Eight. You look at these SEC teams, Kaylee, this conference is dynamite, man.
Yeah, that's the way I feel about it too. It's hard to believe that we're having this conversation about SEC basketball. 14 teams, record set. I don't know if anybody's ever going to be able to do that again. And it really does help Georgia in the spot that they're in because they have faced the highest level of competition week after week. And I think that's going to show when they play in round one. Now, I am interested from this perspective too, because Jack, you're still a student. You're finishing up, and Georgia hasn't been known to have a great basketball team. A lot of people haven't been that invested. So at least from the student body perspective, what have you been able to tell? Are people buying into this team? Is there excitement around campus? Is there just a different feel to it overall?
Well, first off, I'm proud to say that I am a journalism graduate from the University of Georgia as of about 2 months ago, but I am still here. I'm feeling the student vibe. That's right. It's a hard thing to do. But the student section, really, it was incredible all year. You talk about what the athletic administration was able to do, being able to move that student section up. You look at all the giveaways they've had all year, the different incentives they've had to allow students to get more involved with this Georgia basketball program. And obviously it came at the right time. It really was pretty incredible all year. The first year I covered this team was the 6-26 season in 2021, Tom Crean's last year here. And by the time you get to mid-November, it's pretty weak as far as crowds go. It's a pretty emotionless arena, stadium. It's just not that kind of environment. But to sit here in March and listen to Stegman roar, from before the tip even starts, you see the Vanderbilt game, people are filling the stadium up for a noon tip off, right? These are students that are leaving spring break early to come back on a Saturday morning, or I guess noon, but be there as Saturday morning in time for tip off. People are all about it here in Athens.
Yeah, especially too, because it's so much fun whenever you get to this point in the year and March Madness is starting, but it's a lot more fun when you actually get to see the team that you care about up there playing. Mike, do you have any final thoughts about this team, what they've accomplished, or what's ahead for them?
Well, I'm excited for the players. I'm excited for Mike White. I mean, this has been a journey for Georgia basketball. You know, I think you had to go back to 96, 97 for a tournament win that's still on the books, right? 2002, the vacated thing. But it's really more about changing the narrative, and I guess the closest thing that I would compare it to is kind of what Wes Johnson did last year with baseball, right? Getting the Diamond Dogs within a game of the College World Series. And it shows how one coach and how Josh Brooks in the athletic department, how they're able to change the culture. And, I know we don't root for ADs and we don't put them on the big screen, but, I think this is an opportunity for a lot of Georgia fans to sit back and really evaluate, what Josh Brooks has done in his 5 years. I mean, obviously his relationship with Kirby is big, and Josh's experience working with Mark Richt and, having, been a manager for Nick Saban. Obviously the guy knows football, but when you take a look at the hires that Josh Brooks has made and the direction and the way the arrow is pointing up in so many sports, and baseball, Wes Johnson, the Wizard, taking 2 out of 3 from Kentucky, really good start over there for them over at Foley Field. Basketball was going to be a heavier lift. You were really up against it. I mean, you're talking about a program, Kaylee, that in the history of the program has 1 regular season title and 2 basketball tournament titles in the SEC. So you're talking about a program that has literally been a flatliner, a coach's graveyard. We know what the culture was like. And this year, this group of young men have changed the narrative with the wins that they got, the way they stuck to it, the way they bounced back from that 9 of 11, losing 9 out of 11, the way they won the games down the stretch, the way the fans here in Athens supported them. Again, I don't know what's on Atlanta Talk Radio or, where they're eating dinners these days, but I can tell you the people that have been in Athens that have stayed engaged with this program recognize the character that it's taken and understand the culture that Mike White has built. And it really, as I said earlier, really whets the appetite for what is ahead for Georgia basketball, both immediately against a program like Gonzaga. I don't think you could have picked a better first round game. Yeah, it's a big first round opponent, but it's a huge opportunity game for the Dogs. And then into the future with the recruiting boost they're going to get, because there's more good players headed this way that want to play for Mike White.
Yeah, and we were talking about it before y'all got on the call that Georgia's last tournament win was technically 2002, which later that win was vacated. So technically Georgia hasn't had a tournament win since Jack and I have been alive.
My parents met a couple months after Georgia's last tournament win. That I can confirm.
Yeah. All right, Jack, any final thoughts from you?
No, I agree with a lot of what Mike said there. I think it's important to recognize we talked about Blue a lot. We talked about Asa and Silas. Another guy I want to point out that's going to be important with this progress. We talked about the Mike White experience in the NCAA tournament. They do have another player who's got some NCAA experience. It's RJ Godfrey, who went, I believe it was an Elite 8 run last year with Clemson. And that's the kind of stuff that matters when you have veteran guys on that roster who can pull in a little bit more of that experience, a little bit more poise, especially when you've got a Gonzaga or a Houston. But honestly, the way you talk to this team, when you talk to them about these big games, when you see how they handle massive moments, even if they fall behind in a game, man, it's just veteran poise from the sophomores, from the freshmen, from whoever it is. They're not a group that's real knee-jerk reaction. So it'll be interesting to see. It's just going to be fun from here.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel. That's my final takeaway from all of this is March Madness is truly one of my favorite times of the year. The way that the tournament's laid out, there's just so much excitement. And I love the idea of those first couple rounds. Nobody at work is paying attention because all you're doing is watching basketball all day long and making the brackets, everything that goes into it. And to have Georgia be a part of that, it just makes it mean so much more. So I'm really excited for Dogs fans. I'm really excited to be able to cover this and talk about it, regardless of how far they make it. It's such an amazing accomplishment and a testament to what Mike White has done. And I'm so excited that we get to be here and be a part of it for it. So, again, they're going to play Thursday. They'll play Gonzaga. We don't know what time yet. Hopefully you're going to know by tomorrow. But DawgNation, I mean, you can't help but be excited. So, Mike, Jack, thank you so much for joining me. And DawgNation, we'll see you this week when we get to talk about the Dogs taking on the Dogs.